a bishop named Arius disagreed with the rest of the Christian leaders about what it meant for Jesus to be God the Son. We have the concept of Jesus being God the Son back before the year 200 in some of the writers. But Arius said that if Jesus was God the Son, then the Son came along sometime after the Father. The other faction said that the Father and Son were eternal together from the beginning, which is the way we read the first chapter of the Gospel of John. Sounds like hair splitting to us today, but it was a big deal at the time. It even caused civil disturbances. There were riots in some places. And I think this was embarrassing to Constantine. He had legalized Christianity, and now the Christians were causing trouble. Right. He had to clear this up. So he gathered the bishops, all the leaders of big Christian churches together in one town. The sources say there's maybe 200 to 300 of them there. He said, you hash this out, you draw up a statement of what the faith is, and I will enforce it. So the statement that came out is what we call the Nicene Creed. And the Nicene Creed, which starts out, I believe in one God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, can be found in the prayer books of Episcopalians, Lutherans, Catholics, many mainstream denominations, and it's widely accepted today.
What about the claim that the Emperor Constantine actually made Jesus into God?
Again, there they go blaming Constantine for the doctrines again. The doctrines came from this Council of Bishops. Constantine just didn't issue a decree. But yes, there's a point where one character in the DaVinci Code says nobody believed Jesus was God before the Council of Nicaea in the 4th century. And that's absolute nonsense. There are dozens of references in the early Christian writers going back to the year 110, well over 200 years before the Council of Nicaea. Over and over again, we see people refer to Jesus as being in some way God. And to say that the Gnostics didn't believe Jesus was God is even sillier, really, because the Gnostics believed that matter was bad, and most of them taught that Jesus did not have a material body and did not actually suffer on the cross. That was a hallucination.
Well, did Constantine pick out the books of the Bible then?
Well, again, the first time we see a list of the books of the New Testament, the Old Testament obviously had been around already. The books of the New Testament that we have are listed for the first time in about the year 170. And this is in response to the Gnostics, because the Gnostics have written these other Gospels that we see. Particularly Irenaeus, writing around the year 190, comes up and says there are 4 and only 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. Mm-hmm. And in the rest of his writing, he quotes every book of the New Testament we have today, except, I think, letter of James and Revelations are the only 2 he doesn't quote. By the time we get to the Council of Nicaea, the 2 sides are arguing with each other from the same Bible. So I think the New Testament was pretty well set by that time, although the Council of Nicaea did write out a statement, these are the books in the Bible.
Mm-hmm. Well, how about the claim that winners write the history books? I mean, can we actually check the sources that you've been telling us about?
It's certainly true that winners write the history books. There's no doubt about that. However, the losers aren't all gone. That there were Coptic Christians, 6 million of them actually, in Egypt and Ethiopia, that they never accepted the findings of the Council of Nicaea. Their concept of Jesus was that he had only the divine nature, no human nature, whereas the Council of Nicaea said that Jesus had both divine and human natures equally. So we've still got some losers. We also, if you look into the texts, the early Christian writers quote each other in various places. And to think that somebody might have gone back and changed all the Bibles, that's vaguely possible. But that somebody could have carefully gone through and changed the story in all the early Christian writers and got their quotes of each other straight is just impossible to imagine anybody could have done that. So I think we have a pretty good idea what happened.
Well, did Constantine force the empire to become Christian?
Again, the deal Constantine made with the bishops is you decide what the doctrine of the faith is, I'll enforce it. But he only enforced it on people who claimed to be leaders of Christian communities. Pagans were allowed to remain pagans, although certainly Christianity got more fashionable now that members of the royal family were Christians. And it's ironic that one of the punishments for failing to accept the Council of Nicaea for a high-ranking churchman was he could be exiled from the empire. Those who were exiled from the empire converted some of the barbarians who later came back and conquered the Roman Empire. So now the government is taking the Arian position again. So the fact is, despite Constantine's will. Constantine didn't live forever, and the Nicene Creed had its ups and downs for a couple of hundred years before it was universally accepted.
Well, on the facts page, if you go to the Da Vinci Code, Mr. Brown actually says that the Priory of Zion is a real organization dating back to the year 1099, numbering among its grandmasters Isaac Newton and, of course, Leonardo da Vinci. Can you tell us about this organization that he refers to?
The Priory of Zion, unfortunately for Dan Brown, is the product of a con artist. He mentions that there were documents found in Paris in 1975 that told the history of this Priory of Zion and how it had kept the big secret about Jesus and Mary Magdalene, and it had these pardon me, famous Grand Masters. The person who created those documents was a forger named Pierre Plantard, and when the documents were discovered where he'd left them, Plantard got up and he claimed that he was descendant of Jesus Christ, rightful king of France, head of the Freemasons, and everything else he could think of. These documents prove the basis of a book called Holy Blood, Holy Grail, which was published in 1982 and is the primary source for the Da Vinci Code. Holy Blood, Holy Grail is a little bit of an embarrassment because after that was written, the documents that Plantard had were proven to be forgeries. And recently, when Lay and Byjet, the authors of Holy Blood, Holy Grail, sued Dan Brown for taking their ideas, the judge in England said that they were the authors of a pretend history book.
Well, how about the Templars? I mean, they are a real religious organization, aren't they?
Yes, the Templars are very real. They're a very strange episode in the history of Christianity, actually. They were knights in armor who were also monks, and they fought in the Crusades.
Interesting.
They got their rule of how their order would run from St. Bernard of Clairvaux in the year 1128, and they fought in the Crusades until the Crusades ended in the year 1280. Now, after that, they were sitting on a whole lot of money that pilgrims and pious Christians had donated to them to go fight the crusade. Along comes King Philip of France in the early 1300s, and he decides he can use that money better than they can. So he bullied the church into accusing them of heresy and witchcraft so that he could disband the Templars and take their money. The story that's told in the Da Vinci Code says that the Pope had a vision that they were committing witchcraft and that he brought the charges. Pope Clement was not the bad guy in this case. I think the version of the story that Dan Brown is telling comes from the Scottish Rite Freemasons, who since the year 1700 had been saying that they had the secrets and treasures of the Templars.
Well, on the facts page, Dan Brown also refers to Opus Dei. Can you tell us a little bit about this organization?
Yes, Opus Dei is a real Catholic organization. It was founded in 1928 by a Spanish priest to provide a way for people who have jobs and families and live in the world to live a higher level of spirituality. So since it's made up of ordinary lay people who are out in the world, it does not have in it any of the monks like the unfortunate brother Silas in the book. And Dan Brown gets just about everything about Opus Dei wrong. So I would really recommend going to www.opusdei.org, O-P-U-S-D-E-I, and they have a whole section on the various errors about their organization that are in the Da Vinci Code.